How's everybody doing? Hopefully really well. I decided to do this topic tonight partly because I I noticed that I missed some questions in the chat, and then I started looking through the comments. And I used to do these Q&As, I kind of liked it. Only I wouldn't do it live. I would just ask for questions uh, and then answer them and record it. So now we're live. If you guys have questions, otherwise I'll answer some of the questions I've gotten in comments and chat. I do have an update about the cave, if you guys have been following that. I went there today, and I was denied access. So that's the end of that for the time being, I guess. Yeah, I just heard from behind me, "Donde vas?" and which is where you're going. And I guess this number isn't right because it says that there's no one there, and I see you communicating with me. So, yeah. So I'm going back to the cave to. I was gonna try to get a sample for the gold because there is potential. What's up? Yeah, it says 0 still. Potential to get this property here. And I'm going to start talking to everyone about that tomorrow more formally, try to get the details. And I'm actually pretty excited about the direction things are moving in here. I've connected with a couple of shamans and a couple of locals that have relatives. What I've really been looking for are people that are not connected to the plant medicine industry, that are shamans. So I found one, and he actually doesn't drink medicine with tourists, and so that sounds good. He said he did it once, and he'll never do it again. So this is someone who has not been influenced by the ayahuasca industry, which is difficult to find. I mean, this has been going on for 20 years. So it's been a long time that there's been this, I don't know what to call it, integration of, I'm being polite, I mean, it's really a degradation or a corrosion, the negative influence of the ayahuasca industry on the traditional practices. And yeah, so anyways, I went back to the cave and I was going in and someone said, "Where are you going?" And I found out that actually I was correct. It is an old Spanish mine. There is gold in it, and I can't go in there. But the guy that owns the property is just kind of old, and I don't think he cares that there's gold there, and it's for sale. Which this also kind of blew my mind because there's a creek that runs through it. And there's like at the end, you have to walk for like 35 minutes through the jungle. There's ayahuasca everywhere and all kinds of amazing plants, cacao trees, wild ones growing all over the place. And the creek that runs through it is crystal clear water running across rock. So it's crystal clear. If it's been raining, it'll mud up a little bit. But like today, it was just crystal clear. And there are the old mines around it, so it's probably loaded with gold. I couldn't pan either because the river was too flooded for me to access the creek from the riverside, and apparently it's all private property around it. And so I did end up panning a little bit, and it is true that there is tons of fine gold. Oh, you mean the lightning back there? Yeah, that's trippy, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, I'm just not going to really care about the cave full of gold that much because what can I do? Also, you know, you guys, it's like I do want to get money together to conserve rainforest. You know, buying rainforest land sounds like a really good plan, especially with the potential end of Western civilization looming all around us. You know, I mean, there's fruit and palm nuts and all kinds of stuff like that just everywhere here. So, but anytime that you extract gold from hard rock, you're going to be using chemicals that are definitely not eco-friendly, and there's really no clean way that I'm aware of to go about extracting gold from ore. So using a sluice in a river is one thing. There's no chemicals involved. You're not smashing rock even, you're just processing it. Um, so yeah, and then I told you guys about the monkey yesterday, the big alpha male capuchin that just came and jumped in my lap. And he's like, I mean, they're strong, scary things with big fangs. And so I saw him today, and I went up to him, hey, like, what's good, man? How's it going? You know, and he just totally tried to attack me again. So I guess this interaction where he just, I mean, I was petting him and it was totally kosher, but I guess it doesn't mean that tomorrow we're still friends. It's mine, because that was crazy. I walked up to him and put my hand out, and he just bared his fangs and came at me, man. I was like, whoa, okay. Never mind then, dude, you know? All right, so AMA, you guys got anything you want to talk about, or should I answer these crazy ass questions from people? I try to pick, usually I try to pick questions when I used to do this anyways, where people are kind of picking on me. And that was more difficult this time, actually. I mean, I already did the Karen one. But one of the okay, well, we'll start with a question from someone. About, you know, they basically said, is it true that you went to prison for drug charges at one point in your life? And yes, it is true that I've been to prison. Not for terribly long. It was about 10 months. Yeah, the spider's over there. The spider's over there. We saw him last night. Did you miss that? God, you know, I always try to turn the notifications off. But man, sorry, it drives me insane. And it doesn't happen until I start streaming. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Okay, prison. And part of the reason that I chose this, oh yeah, well, that's the crazy thing. That's what I was saying about him and his eating. Like, what he must come out later. I told you one night we found him in the bedroom. Speaking of bugs in the house, I got my second bullet ant bite last night, and that's not fun, man. That sucks. But anyways, the spider, he's always just got his legs out there. You never see his body. His legs are just sticking. There's like a hole in the cinder block, and his arms are just kind of sticking out. But, you know, he never, like, comes out and runs around unless that one time we saw him in the house is the only time we've seen his body. Or her body, or whatever it is. Okay, so, a couple of reasons I'm talking about this. I mean, I feel like drug law reform is one of the big things that we have on the table. And as, like, a 26-year-old kid, I did 10 months in an almost maximum security prison. And I'm going to tell you guys about some of the people that were in there with me. For 7.5 milligram Loratabs or Vicodin, which is not much. Like, it barely would have gotten you high. Now, it should be noted that that's not really all I did, but that was what I was ultimately sentenced for. I did catch a couple of minor assault charges during that time period. I crashed my car into a gas station, and that was crazy. The cop told my girlfriend, because we had this huge bag of Xanax. This was many years ago. I just found out that I was sick, or, you know, I had just become sick. And I was totally thinking I was dying, so I just went into I don't give a fuck mode, and I mean, I was definitely dangerous, out of control. Like, it's a miracle that nothing worse happened than, I mean, it got pretty ugly. But, so, but what I was actually sentenced to prison for was a couple of painkillers. And and I had a prescription for them. But public defenders, their job isn't really to help you stay out of jail. Their job is to make sure that you go to jail. Basically, I mean, they're not all like that, but the one that I got in particular was actually jockeying for a prosecutor's office job at the time, which is totally a conflict of interest, and he should never been allowed to defend me. I mean, at some point, I'm probably going to hire a lawyer and try to sue to get the felony removed. But the question wasn't just about whether I had been to prison. It was also, what do I think about the criminal justice system and crime and punishment kind of thing, you know? And so the other thing that I saw today, I started to mention this earlier and I got sidetracked, was that I was on YouTube and somehow I found myself watching a video about this 18-year-old kid that was street racing, and he killed a mom and a toddler. I guess she was like pushing a baby carriage or some such scenario. And he got 24 years. And I guess, you know, now that I'm a father, this is a relatively new thing for me, and I never really had any family when I was a kid, exactly, or even really friends. And the family that I did have, I wasn't really close to even as a child. So this is kind of a new thing for me to have this kind of bond with anyone at all. I mean, I realized that after my mom died, I think at her funeral maybe even, that the only person that I had ever really loved was my dog that had died, because I cried like a baby when that dog died, but pretty unfazed by everything else that's ever happened. So, and of course there's a lot to that, but what I'm saying is I think it affects me more deeply because now, you know, I have a child and Enrica, and of course if some kid killed them, you know, I'd be coming with gats to blow the wall out, like raining death like atomic fallout, you know, like. But what it made me think about was that, you know, the 10 months in prison that I did definitely didn't really punish me, because, I mean, it's part of it is like my attitude, I think. I look at everything like it's about the experience. And so for me, it was just another adventure. I didn't like jail. And I had to wait in jail for 4 months, and there's just cinder blocks everywhere in a little room, and you hardly ever go outside, and they're just like staring at these blocks. And after like a month of that, I mean, me and my cellmate would literally sometimes just lay there and just like blocks and blocks and blocks, blocks and blocks, like both of us, just like muttering blocks for hours. It's really not cool. And it's really boring, you know. In prison, though, you have the yard, you have your job usually, you have books, there's a library, you can usually go like 2 or 3 times a week, as long as you're in good standing for everything. And I was a musician, and I was the best guitarist in the facility, so I got hired by all of the bands in the facility. So I was always at band practice. That's like all I did in prison. It was like music camp or something. But that doesn't mean I didn't almost die. I mean, I definitely barely made it out of there alive. I think if I had been in there maybe 48 hours, 72 hours more, I'd probably be dead, because the tension between me and some of the really scary people that were never getting out had gotten very high. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the people. They put I guess I can't say I was a nonviolent offender, because I had you know, I didn't have felony violence. I had misdemeanor violence, just like fist fights and stuff. But still, no murder charges, nothing like that. And so they said it was a mistake on the paperwork, but they're not going to fix it. So there's a point system. If you have like 1 to 10 points, you go to a minimum security prison. If you have like 10 to 20 points, then you go to a medium, and so on and so forth. And I think it's actually a lot less. It's like 1 to 4 is low, and then 4 to 8, you know, because I had 4 points. So I was supposed to go to a facility that had no fence around it, freedom of movement. You go wherever you want all day. You just can't leave the property. No big deal, really. You know, it's not a big deal. You're not going to get raped. You're not going to get murdered. No one's in there for anything serious, because I just had some pharmaceuticals and not even very many of them. And instead, the prison bus rolled up to this prison with, like, you know, big razor wire fence, and guys with like machine gun looking things on towers. And I noticed when I got in the bus, like, there was a guy in a cage that was like shackled all his hands to his feet, and he had like devil horns tattooed on his head and wearing like a red suit, so it was perfect, you know. And it was in the buses, it's both sexes. So there was like this big black girl behind him, and she said, "Honey, what'd you do?" And he's like, "I hacked an entire family to pieces with a hatchet high on methamphetamine. Like, I got 792 years or whatever." And I'm like, huh, that's odd. You know, why am I on the same bus as this guy? So we pull up to this prison with the guys with the guns and the towers and the razor blades all around it. And I'm like, this doesn't look like a minimum security prison. And so we go in and they're processing me, and I'm like, it's occurred to me, like, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these gang members, people that are obviously in prison for life, and huge, scary dudes. No one is smiling, you know, and I'm like, man, this can't be right. Something's wrong. And so I asked my case manager, like, we were going through my paperwork when you come in, you know, and he's like, so, you know, you have 40 points. And I was like, no, I have 4 points. And he says, well, it says here you have 40 points. And I was like, no, I just had a nonviolent drug charge. I'm supposed to be in a minimum security prison. And he's like, well, your paperwork says 40 points. And I was like, well, can't we just fix it or something? He's like, no, you're here for the duration of your stay. Which I thought was completely crazy, that they're not going to say like, oh, our bad, let's fix that. You know, it's like the clerk was just being an asshole and put a 0 behind the 4, or did it legitimately on accident. And so now I'm in a prison, 25, 26 years old, for a couple of Vicodin, with guys that, I mean, let's talk about some of these dudes. There was Fish, who had like 795 years because he got high on, and that was a sad thing. Meth, stay away from meth, man. A lot of these guys that had killed the shit out of like 8 people or whatever, and done all these terrible, crazy things, they were all high on meth for 2 weeks, and none of them would have done it otherwise. Was Kamala Harris my DA? Pretty much, man. That guy was such a piece of shit. He was trying to become a DA, so he and you know what's funny too? The person that asked this is almost definitely not watching. But you know, it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, I don't know. You guys feel free to ask questions if you want to change the subject, but in the meantime, I'm just going to tell this story because that's what the question was that I picked. So Fish had killed a bunch of people high on meth. There was a guy named Hillbilly that had also killed a bunch of people, but he had hung the body parts in like trees around his neighborhood. And so they charged him with mayhem. And this guy had like 800 years, and we would walk around the yard, and he would always talk about all the stupid shit he was going to do that would get his ass put right back in prison as soon as he got out, you know? I'm like, yeah, dude, when you get out in 2,655 years, oh, that's right, yeah, he had like thousands of years, that guy. And so what happens if someone that has life in prison kills you is that they go to the hole for 6 months. So when you're in a prison like that, you literally know at all times that anyone around you will kill you. Like, no problem. Like, most of them have killed people before, And literally, there's nothing they can do to them that they haven't already done. You're already in prison. What are they going to do? Put you in prison again? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, stand up, now stand up again. Like, once you stand up, you can't stand up again. You've already stood up. You know what I mean? They're in prison forever. Like, there's nothing more they can do. They sent them to the hole for 6 months. So that's crazy, you know, to just walk around with all these murderers all the time and knowing that they'll just kill whoever, whenever. You know, I mean, it's not even a big deal. So I mean, there's a lot that I'm getting at. Oh, I'm going to tell you one more story about one of these inmates, though, man. There's actually a lot of really good stories from this time that I spent in prison. I mean, I'm actually not upset about it, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really regret it, because nothing really bad happened, and it was a hell of an experience, you know? I almost got killed for not being racist one time. Because this black guy came and wanted to sit at the table, and I'm like a liberal from Colorado. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna say no, you know what I mean? It didn't even occur to me that I wasn't supposed to let that happen. You know, I knew in jail that we didn't really mix that much, but we weren't supposed to. But you know, I didn't know we couldn't tell him not to sit with us. And so he came up, and I guess he didn't know any better, and he's like, "Can I sit here?" And I was like, "Sure." And when I got back to my cell, there was like a bunch of white supremacist gang members waiting for me. Like, dude said, "If I ever see you or you ever let a bug sit with us again," and I was like, "What the fuck is a bug?" And he just looked at me and shook his head. "Don't come back to prison, dude." I'm like, "All right, bro. Yeah, that's good advice. I'll try to remember that shit when I get out of here." So the craziest one, though, and this is a true story, was Elvis's bass player. Dude played on, I think, Hound Dog, but definitely some of the big songs. He had newspaper clippings. Like, definitely when lifers tell you shit, you're like, yep, sure, because most of them are just making shit up. Their life is gone, you know. They're not, like, they're just making shit up to have a story. And in his case, it was actually true, and he'd been in there since, like, 1967. This was 2005, maybe. The longest guy in there, he'd been in there since 1962. He was on a walker. Can you imagine that shit? In 2005, this dude has been locked up since 1962. Like, I actually met him. I mean, I'm not real happy about it because he did something really terrible. But, so Elvis's bass player. This is how I ended up in prison with Elvis's bass player. I mean, you guys are just dialing in, missed how I went to prison, but this is how Elvis's bass player ended up in prison. So, dude's name was John. That's not really relevant, I guess, but he played in the classic rock band in one of the prison bands. And so one day I asked him, like, well, you know, somebody mentioned the Elvis thing, and I was like, what? And I had him tell me his story, and then I'm like, well, how the hell did you end up in here? And he told me the story that he killed his wife, and he buried her in the driveway, and then he called, they were building an addition or something, or they were doing something to the driveway, or I don't know what, and so they called to get more gravel, and the dump truck comes, and he had buried her in a shallow grave in the driveway. So when the dump truck came and went to dump the gravel, when the guy pulled out, his tire spun, hit the body. He was looking in the rearview mirror, and he saw the body fly out from under his truck and slam into the garage door. And he drove to town and called the police. I was like, what, John, you know? So the essence of the question, though, you know, should people even go to prison, I think, is what this person meant by, you know, what do I think of the criminal justice system? First of all, like, drug laws are not designed to protect people. We all know that. I don't even want to talk about it because it's just stupid. Like, we should just all know that. No one should have to say it. The government never banned drugs because they thought they were dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, none of the shit that they say about it is true. And, you know, when you think about life and how short of a time we're here on this planet, and also the impact of doing time in prison, being incarcerated, being surrounded by violent lunatics, and also the violence you witness. I mean, I saw a guy almost get his head cut off in there. And I mean, you know, it didn't really consciously bother me that much, but I'm sure that it did something to me having to walk around with people that might kill me at any moment, you know. And every now and then I would accidentally get into it with somebody that I knew was like in there for multiple homicides. And that, you know, that's, once there's a problem, you just have no idea what was going to happen. And some of those dudes that have been locked up for 20 years, they're so big and strong. Like this one guy would come into my cell every day for a while and wrap me up in like a bear hug, and I couldn't move. Like he was literally so much stronger than me that I couldn't like budge at all. Like not squirming was not even an option. Like there's nothing I could do. Never hurt me, never tried to rape me, never did anything. He would just come in and like remind me of that and then leave. But who knows? Eventually it might have gotten ugly. I'm sure it would have, you know. I don't know what the fuck was going on there. But the point being, so we take people like this 18-year-old kid that accidentally killed a mom and a toddler, which is terrible, you know. Like I said, I mean, if somebody killed Enrica and Nagual, I can't even imagine what I would do if I caught them, especially if it was before I had time to get over the initial shock and rage and, you know, I mean, it's crazy how I feel even just thinking about it. But that's not right either, and I know that. The truth is that, you know, I'm always ragging on Christianity, but the one redeeming characteristic that it has, I think, is the focus on forgiveness. And this is, you know, people talk about healing your lineage. It's super important because, you know, whatever like negative traits I have, for example, because I've always been the person under the tripping in prison. Actually, Tim Leary did that with a bunch of inmates. The Texas psilocybin experiments, he somehow got permission from the state of Texas, of all states, you know, like you would think that it would have been California and in fact, I could be wrong. I don't think I am, though. I'm pretty sure it happened in Texas. But Tim Leary got permission to go into the prisons and give the inmates high doses of psilocybin. And there are transcripts of these conversations, man. It's fucking incredible. And what they discovered was that the recidivism rate of the people that were given the psilocybin with Timothy Leary, and you know, no one believes those guys now or later. They're like, yeah, I was in prison and Timothy Leary came in and we all dosed together, and people are like, shut the fuck up, you're so full of shit, you know. But there's people out there that actually did that, tripped with Timothy Leary in prison in Texas, you know. But the bullet point of the presentation is that it did reduce recidivism by like 77% or something. The results of the experiment are in dispute to this day, but I know for certain that it's true that it helped, you know. But what I was saying about that is that, you know, when you look at your own influences, and this is not about blaming your parents, it's actually the opposite thing, but I need to point that out because it can easily be construed as that. But that's not the point. Your negative tendencies, or negative characteristics, it's all, or it's very largely a matter of influence. And so if you were abusive, for example, just to keep it simple, chances are very, very good that you were abused, right? I mean, most sex offenders are people that were sexually abused. And that is a great example because, you know, one of the vengeance crimes, you know, that people always say, like all pedophiles should I mean, I accidentally watched a video where these people fed this 21-year-old kid's balls to a pit bull while they were still attached to him because he had touched a kid or something. And, um, so here's the problem though. And this is really elucidates this very well is that so what you're doing is you're taking the victim of these people that we say are monsters that are going to grow up to be monsters and saying we should torture and kill them. They're the victims. You know what I mean? So it's like this crazy vicious circle. Yeah, Jim Jones actually, that cult lived right down the street from me in Mendocino. That they started in Redwood Valley, which was near where I lived in Mendocino. Uh, but so I guess it's kind of a long-winded way of saying that people aren't really to blame for the things that they do, in my opinion, anyways. And so, as individuals, one of the ways that we can release the hold that the past has on us is to look back and figure it out. Like what was wrong with my mother that that led to this influence on me that created these characteristics that are undesirable. And what did my father do? And then you don't want to resent them, so you think, well, then that means that their father did this to them, and then the father before that, and so it just gets passed down and passed down and passed down, and then the hope is that through some type of revelation, through an elevated awareness, we are able to analyze ourselves, or maybe we have someone else analyze us, but either way, we become the point of termination for for this chain reaction of okay, so the death penalty, that's also really, really bad. There are some people that probably can't be redeemed. I've met them. It's possible that some types of psychopathy cannot be treated. I think that because of the way that LSD, for example, allows us to rewire the mind, like just physically rewire bad circuits, that we could probably correct anything. Absolutely, and for sure, pedophilia, certain types of schizophrenia, probably most types of schizophrenia, alcoholism, depression, all of these things that have a neurological basis that can be neuroimaged, and all of those can, including pedophilia is associated with a physical brain normality in most cases. The self-reflection isn't impossible after years and years of not doing it if you introduce a compound that restores neuroplasticity to the brain. And I disagree, Charles, that no amount of LSD would correct Joe Biden. I think probably any amount of LSD would help Joe Biden. I mean, after 80 years or however old he is, it would be a little bit difficult. But I think that he is probably a narcissistic sociopath, but I doubt that he is beyond help. I really don't agree with that. I think also that you have to understand the real power of LSD to rewire the mind can be taken to extremes that are almost unthinkable. And we can thank the CIA for providing us with proof of that, because the MK Ultra experiments, one of the things that they actually did was they wiped the entire slate of minds of people completely clean and then reprogrammed another personality. And they did that because if they prolonged exposure to massive doses of LSD combined with electroshock therapy, they were able to catalyze or they were able to induce neuroplasticity to the degree that there was nothing. It was as smooth as a baby's butt. The brain, all the wrinkles and creases were completely eradicated. So it was just like a bowling ball. Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I'm saying that I think that almost every neurological aberration in every person is not beyond the scope of being helped with therapy and psychedelics. Uh, and the reason that I went on that long winded story about my own experience with prison over a couple of pills is that, I don't think it made sense to lock me in a cage with a bunch of murderers. Like, that's going to make me less dangerous or something. And when I was watching this kid get packed away for 24 years for accidentally killing a mom and a toddler, and look, he was being reckless, like it was terrible, but here's the thing, you guys, and this is another place where our government has lied and totally fucked everyone over. You were not an adult at 18. 18 has nothing to do with anything biological or biochemical or neurological. Nothing, absolutely nothing. The only relevance that 17 and 18 have to anything is that that was the youngest age that the government thought that they could convince people to allow them to send their children to kill other children and die. It has nothing to do with anything. Like, you've hit puberty at like between 9 and 13 or whatever, right? So sexual maturity has already happened a long time ago. And the brain doesn't stop developing until 21 to 25. So what is 17 or 18? It's nothing but just an age that the government thinks it's okay to murder children. They're not adults. So to sentence anyone whose prefrontal cortex has not finished developing and therefore does not have a fully developed sense of consequence, and the judge actually said, well, you're 18 years old. I thought about sentencing you as a youth, but the kid had just turned 18. And he's like, so I'm going to give you 24 years. And this kid was like obviously soft, upper middle class probably. He didn't look really like egoic or like, he struck me as a pretty gentle kid that had just happened to do something really stupid and something really terrible happened. But now they're going to put his ass in prison for 2.5 decades, and when he comes out, he is going to be dangerous, hardened. He's going to have no life skills. That is not a solution. That's not a solution. The solution would have been grief counseling provided by the state, or if the family couldn't afford it, and therapy and rehabilitation for that kid. Maybe put him through something, you know what I mean? Tell him he's going to prison for 24 years and let him sit in jail for a couple of months, 6 months, thinking that that's what's happening to him or something, and then let his ass out, And I know that it's terrible that those people died, but we have to think about it from a sociological and objective perspective. And the reality is that putting young kids in jail for anything, is only going to create more dangerous criminals. So I think that our whole entire society needs an overhaul, a redesign, a relaunch from the ground up. Yeah, to put me in prison for a couple of pills with a bunch of murderers it's completely insane. And all it did was just set my life back a few years and make it more. It's probably part of the reason that I never bothered to really try to ever integrate into society, because just about the age that I was starting to transcend my white trash upbringing and I'd gotten a normal job and had a bank account. Not that I think that that's the right thing to do or that there's any reason to value any of that. But just looking at it from a sociological point of view, I was doing all that. And so, to put me in prison and then I get out, I got no money, it's harder to get a job, I've been traumatized, what purpose does that serve? Who is that helping? It's not helping society. It's not helping the individuals involved. It's not helping the families of victims. It's not helping the families of perpetrators. And I think that when you find yourself in extraordinary circumstances, an extraordinary response is called for. And so when, somebody like myself or someone more sort of credible, I guess, from a mainstream point of view, suggests like really radical or extreme adaptations in order to address something, people tend to dismiss it. But I think that's the reason we're stuck. That's the reason things aren't fluid. That's the reason that we're not evolving and transcending the morass of our global chaostrophe. And the reality is that we do have tools at our disposal. We do have techniques to employ those tools to make them efficacious. And I think that if we know that psychedelics like LSD are so powerful at creating a brain that is very neuroplastic, and also the neurogenesis, but we can just lump that together into, we need a word for both at once, It probably already exists. In fact, I think I know, anyways, you know what I mean. We know that you can use these things to completely rewrite a new personality. So to say the only thing we can do with a person is throw them into a prison is completely stupid. There is, however, well, it's not just stupid. It's also because there is a profit motive. And there's also sort of like this control and fear motivation, I think, that they have for handling things the way that they do. So you might say, am I seriously suggesting that we just take criminals and give them a bunch of LSD or psilocybin and talk to them? Yes, I am seriously suggesting that. So did Timothy Leary, and he was a Harvard psychologist, and he was right, and they did experiments, and he proved that it worked. The normal recidivism rate is that 11% of them don't come back. Leary's group, 77% of them did not return to prison. That's a difference of 66%. So, it's not like we have a utopian, perfect solution to all of this, but we definitely could be doing way fucking better than we are. And it's not even that difficult. It's not outside of our reach. And there are, the only reasons that it's not already protocol are financial benefit for certain people, prejudice, often rooted in religious beliefs, and because it's a tool for control and suppression to keep these things illegal. So, I know I've said this before, but the reality is that whether you're talking about marijuana or psychedelics, and really psychedelics were even worse, because with marijuana, at least the researchers just said, well, it's actually not very dangerous, not very addictive. In the late 30s and early 40s, when Hanslinger, I think it was his name, Harry Anslinger, commissioned them to study, because I guess he thought that they would say, it makes Negroes rape white women, or whatever it is, the answer he was looking for, they made the old propaganda films where the guys would get stoned and go literally like driving around looking for people to run over. And that's what they were telling white America that marijuana did. It makes the music so the notes, you have more time between them and you can fit more of them in. That was one of my other favorite ones that they said. Well, no, they didn't have a redneck thing. It was that other really stiff, like white person 1950s voice, you know, with the really nasally cracker ass uh, kind of accent. Um, but it was even worse with psychedelics because what actually happened is that the researchers said we can cure every neurological aberration under the sun, oftentimes with a single dose with these compounds. They didn't say they will make you insane and we should stop everyone from taking them before they are all destroyed. And the government said, okay, well, then we need to make them illegal and, you know. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Tim Leary actually wasn't a raving lunatic idiot. Like, I hate so much that people have that opinion. I do understand that from a normie, square, sort of matrix mind point of view, Leary did create circumstances that discouraged continued scientific experiment and all that sort of shit. But the reality is that we have a international crisis of consciousness that can be corrected with these compounds, and that it's just fundamentally wrong that anyone thinks that they can decide what my state of consciousness should be at any given time. It is absolutely insane that anyone thinks it's any of their business what anyone does ever, if it does not impede the free will of another sentient being. Period. End of story. That's all law should be. The master says, "This is your kingdom. Try not do what you want, but try not to kill anyone." You know the rules of the game. Play. That's it. That's it. There's no law beyond do what thou wilt, but know that love is the law. It's simple. It's really simple. And so I don't think that Timothy Leary really deserves the you know the attitude that people have towards him as this like renegade lunatic. I can't believe that iconoclast is being used in a negative sense these days. Like that's a bad thing. So I think, you know, Leary, it's not just what I think. Leary's IQ was tested. You know, he was definitely one of the highest IQs ever recorded in modern history. And he knew what he was doing, and he was correct, and that's right. Psychedelics, the primary and first application. What's up, Ronnie? And thank you, man. By the way, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon for premium content. We have conservation efforts. We're trying to get some land purchased down here. We have to rent canoes and guides, and it's just, we can't pay for all this stuff out of pocket. We're demonetized. So you can make a one-time contribution through the PayPal or Zelle email in the chat and the description, or the wallet address, the crypto wallet address. You can send crypto. So thank you guys so much that have done that already. I forgot to make the link, but the reincarnation reveal part 2 of that is going to be tomorrow in the patron thing. So yeah, that's why Tim Leary started in the fucking prisons. You know what I mean? Like, the whole time the psychedelic minds have had the reins if they would have let us. There was right on, man. There was no reason for them to intervene or interfere. Nothing was going wrong. Everything was fine. You know, I mean, it must have been. I cannot imagine being there and witnessing this shit. Like Timothy Leary going on the nightly news. You know, it was still black and white television, and there are all these like square normie people like. You know, they really, whatever a doctor said. I mean, they're still kind of like that. You know, in the current moment. Thank you. You know what? I have to go downstairs and put this phone on the charger too. It's gonna die before I'm done running my mouth. So we're gonna have to take a journey real quick. Yeah, I mean, here's this doctor from Harvard coming on the news at night, and people are expecting him to be saying, LSD is bad, don't let your kids take it and whatever. And instead, he's saying, well, maybe you should try turning on with your children rather than getting angry with them and see what it's all about. Maybe you'll learn some things about yourself and about your children, and everyone will grow from the experience. I mean, this dude was seriously talking like that on like Fox 5 News in like 1959 or whatever. I mean, my grandmother actually remembered it. She's like, I remember that crazy doctor coming on TV and telling people to take LSD with their kids. Tim Leary was awesome. And, yeah, he was totally right that you should start in the prisons, I don't know if it's working. Well, we'll see. If it dies, I guess, then you guys will know that I'm gone. So. And the other thing that people talk about, Leary, like he was a traitor, he was actually a CIA agent. This is another place that right-wing Christianity has, there's nothing wrong with it, man. It's like, even for someone like me, the reality of psychedelics and plant medicine rubs up against my matrix programming sometimes when I hear it. For example, people, you'll see this a lot in the Facebook groups about psychedelics. People will say like, well, what about teenagers and psychedelics? Yes, it's fine. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Just because something alters your consciousness does not mean that it's like just fundamentally bad somehow or damaging. In fact, the science all shows us that all it does is create more neurogenesis and restore neuroplasticity. And I'm not saying that like every 12-year-old on earth needs to go out and eat a half a sheet or whatever. But here's the reason this matters. It was a Brazilian study involving 60 ayahuasca drinking teenagers in the ghetto. The barrios of Brazil, which are hella like the 11-year-olds smoke crack and shit. You know what I mean? It's really bad. So they did a study on the ayahuasca drinking teenagers, and they found no body dysmorphia, no depression, no drug use, no hard drug use, no alcoholism, no violence, no tendency toward criminality, no problems at all, no cognitive. In fact, they scored better on cognitive tests. So, when people hear stories about people like taking psychedelics with their teenage kids and they're horrified, it's like, that's completely stupid. The actual studies and evidence show that teenagers that take psychedelics are actually far less riddled with complexes and mental problems and addiction and violence and all of the things that I just listed. I mean, like literally every category that they scored them in, they were significantly in better shape than the non-ayahuasca drinking teenagers. And I think that it was like 14-year-olds, so pretty young kids, And you have to take into consideration that we're talking about kids that are from seriously rough circumstances. So for them to not exhibit these characteristics that they're being tested for because of ayahuasca is extraordinary. So pregnant and breastfeeding women, people will judge them a lot. You see them in ayahuasca ceremonies a lot. And you know what? In the jungle, yeah, it's totally true, man. There are people that have been giving mushrooms to really young kids, and they are like star children or something. It does not harm them. They're like just a billion years beyond a normal child. That's all that happens. And people get so triggered, and I can kind of understand why. It's just so against our cultural programming. But for me, I can't just like lie about the evidence of my senses. I've seen this. And being around Grateful Dead culture too. I mean, deadheads start giving their kids acid right away. I mean, I'm not when they're babies, but really, really young. And, you know, these kids are like super independent. Like, I know, you know, one example, this guy is like now a professional musician. He's never had a job except working for himself doing computer programming. He left school at 15, but he makes like, you know, tons of money, and he does exactly what he would do. Like, he's living his dream, you know? And he's been taking acid since he was like 12 or something with his parents and the family. I mean, not like every day or anything, but definitely doing it. And I think that that's part of the reason why he's so healthy and balanced, and he's doing exactly what he wants with himself. You know, I think it also it makes the matrix programming, it can't really take root if you're, you know, deflecting it from the time of your youth, you know, with LSD. Of course, you know, it's got to be done reasonably and responsibly, and I'm not really advocating for this. I'm just saying that the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that it's positive and not harmful even for adolescents. Marijuana, not so much. But that's the thing, you have to judge every substance on its own. Like, marijuana has, it sort of like pickles the brain in a way. Like, it's not permanent, but it does neutralize certain brain cells, and it can impede development. So you don't want to give that to someone whose brain hasn't stopped developing. I mean, really, marijuana probably shouldn't be smoked, at least not routinely, until you're like 25 or whatever it is when your brain is done developing. Psychedelics are different. They accentuate and enhance the development of the brain, and so the rules are different. And it's just really difficult for a lot of people to accept that. And what I was saying about pregnant and nursing women in the jungle, you know, when a newborn baby, and this isn't like every tribe, certain tribes, but the first thing that goes in that child's mouth is ayahuasca, not breast milk, because they put the ayahuasca on the nipple before the baby's mouth goes on it. And the indigenous people say that it's like a vaccine, which, by the way, it's really great to be here. You know, if you're a person that isn't really like down with the whole COVID narrative and wearing a mask and all that stuff, yeah, I don't really smoke pot either. I was walking. I went to the jungle today, which was great because you guys know I haven't been healthy, and this was the first day I felt really well enough to go out and gold pan a little bit for quite some time. So that was nice. But on the way home, no taxis stopped, and I'm like walking down this road in the jungle forever, and it's hot, and you know, going gold panning for a couple hours is one thing, but then having to walk 10 miles back to town was not on the agenda. Yeah, well, California, dude. I mean, that's then pot is a different thing. Like I said, man, you know, you don't want kids smoking weed, man. That's not good. Like the bass player in my last band was like 12 years old because that's when he started smoking an ounce a day because he's from Humboldt. You know, I mean, I don't think that's all that it is, but that's a lot of it. It just froze the development of his brain. He's a very extreme case, that guy. But yeah, that's not good. But anyways, so I'm walking along, and the buses will just stop and pick you up. And finally a bus came along, and I'm thinking, oh shit, I don't know if I have a mask on me. And they just want me to hurry up and get in the bus. You know, the guy's like, come on, come on, come on. And I'm like digging in my pockets trying to find a mask because I'm trying to be respectful. And I get on the bus and look around, it's fucking full, and there's like 2 masks in the whole entire bus. And and you know, I was like digging, the guy realizes what I'm doing, and he's like, you need a mask. If you get sick, go see a shaman, dumbass. Get in the bus, you know. It's like, that's nice, you know. It's like, fuck me, that's great, you know. We don't do that here. And it's true, no one does. I mean, the one thing that should be noted is that almost no one comes here. So it is like, I mean, I am increasingly suspicious of the COVID narrative. I was suspicious in the first place when they said, well, we found it on the doorstep of the only laboratory in the world that engineers it to make it infectious for humans. It's normally not infectious for humans. And the Trump and Obama administrations both funded that laboratory. And, you know, it's like, okay, No, 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 yeah, we should just whatever they say, it's fine. It didn't come from the lab, and the government's got nothing to do with it, and I mean, it's just so stupid that, like, that part's not conspiracy theory. It's totally over the table, acknowledged by the government that they funded it. I mean, they were talking about it when they were grilling Fauci. They're like, you were paying to make this virus to Dr. Fauci. Like they're actually saying that to him. What I think they're doing is they're trying to frame him for it. They're saying now that it was crazy to watch, and I'm also noticing this is a big deal that all of a sudden they're saying that because the COVID thing, it was supposed to be 100% not engineered in a lab, and you're an idiot conspiracy theorist if you say anything else, right? I mean, it's like I can see people dialing in and dialing out as soon as they figure out what I'm talking about here, because it's one of those things that people just can't even think about. It's like people are still going to get mad at me for saying this stuff, even though the government's admitting it right now. You know what I mean? Like, they're still going to think, oh, this guy's one of those conspiracy theory idiots, even though you can like literally watch the government grilling Fauci on YouTube, like everything I'm saying right now, But I know for sure it's like, but that's not what I was told when I was the most afraid. Like that's the imprint they're gonna take. Oh shit, I was gonna talk about adrenochrome, speaking of fear, and how fucking stupid that is. Because somebody asked, that was one of the questions. Like, what do you know about adrenochrome? I know a lot about adrenochrome. I started studying psychedelics when I was 11 years old. I read the Psychedelics Encyclopedia, all 1,100 pages, 3 times by the time I was in 7th grade, right? I know a lot about psychedelics, and I know a lot about adrenochrome. I mean, as much as there is to know, really. I mean, it's the dumbest fucking conspiracy theory of all, almost. Like, it's up there. And once I tell you why, you will understand that there's absolutely no question that it's completely stupid. Like, it's so stupid that it's inconceivable that anyone, because if I hear something like my just instinct, especially because we all have laptops and phones within hand's reach, is to look it up. No, it won't make you trip, but it's even worse than that. It's more like a stress hormone. It's terrible. Like, if you took some adrenochrome right now, dude, you'd be like ripping your own eyeballs out and shit if you took too much of it. But we'll get there. We were still talking about something else, weren't we? Oh yeah. How ridiculous the COVID thing. It looks like they're framing Fauci. I saw whoever is interrogating him. So I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but the charger says it's plugged in, so it should. Okay, so we were talking about Fauci, and I didn't even watch the whole video, but they were basically they were saying well, why were you funding this laboratory? And he's like, well, I just worked for the administrations. Like, he's trying to blame it on the higher ups. And they're trying to put it on him, I think, because they're trying to absolve the higher levels of the political hierarchy from whatever shady ass shit was going on. And I would think that, especially since people were so determined, they were so convinced that, oh, COVID, if you think it was, engineered, you're fucking stupid because they told us so. I mean, I don't know who still thinks like that the government said something, so that's the truth, and if you think otherwise, you're stupid. Like, when did we end up on a planet full of people like that? Like, that is just so goddamn insane that I just can't believe it's happened. But almost more disturbing is the fact that no one seems to really be following this. I mean, I know people are kind of noticing, but it doesn't seem like it's this really big deal. And the fact that they're actually accusing him of having something to do with it, like treason style, collaborating with China, kind of, I mean, it's gotten super insane. And it's like people, rather than having to accept that what they thought was was correct isn't. Yeah, they are. It is really like mass hypnosis. It really is. And it is kind of surprising to me, at least to the extent that I'm surprised at the extent of it. What do you mean, like what, like? All right. Well, let's move on though, because I ranted about fucking COVID for hours yesterday. Like, uh, oh yeah, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, no, it just is massness, hope, hip, hisnopus. Do you guys know Pink Floyd's art company was called Hypnosis? I thought that was pretty clever. Okay, so adrenochrome. Let's talk about how fucking dumb this is. First of all, as you said, it's really cheap to synthesize, and I don't even think it's illegal. Hypnosis, hip like cool, like hypnosis. Um, so it's really cheap to synthesize, but also your adrenal gland only has a very tiny amount in it, and only sometimes. And so a baby, their adrenal gland is going to be like like that would be like an adult's. So I don't even know. I mean, like really small. So if we were extracting this drug from babies, there wouldn't be 8 million missing kids. They would all be gone. There wouldn't be any kids left. Also, some of the conspiracy theory, like, look, obviously there really is an elite pedophile conspiracy. Bill Gates saying that he was associating with if that, yeah, pea-sized if even that. Bill Gates saying, and it's not like it would be full of adrenochrome. There would be like traces of the molecule in it. Bill Gates saying that he was associating with this guy in order to get a Nobel Prize is just like, but it's obviously true. But they're not harvesting the adrenal glands of babies, because that would be the stupidest fucking thing ever in the history of stupid fucking things. And to make it even dumber, one of the reasons they're always saying that people take adrenochrome is that it will make you look young for a really long time. Stress hormones literally cause you to age rapidly. So what would actually happen is that your hair would go gray faster, you would wrinkle faster, you might have heart attacks, you might have strokes, and the effect of the adrenochrome, rather than being, I saw some idiots in, I mean, there's so many of these people associating with like the mystery school traditions and all that kind of stuff. I hate to even associate with myself with it anymore, because there's just so many morons that have inundated this. It's just so dumb. But that somebody had posted that someone had overheard the Facebook guy saying that adrenochrome was one of the most enjoyable human things he had ever done, and the quote was just so obviously like it sounded like something a comic book character would say. It was obviously not real. Yeah, it's like we're living in idiocracy for sure. But so they attributed that quote to the Facebook guy, and adrenochrome would not be enjoyable. The response to adrenochrome would be that you would sweat profusely, you would have a headache, blurred vision, panic, fear, shortness of breath, possibly heart attack and seizure. It's just fucking stupid. And it came from a book called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. And there have been rumors of adrenochrome on the black market since I was in high school. It's people would. It was like this legend, that came from a Hunter S. Thompson book. Like, no one takes adrenochrome. I've known Satanists. Like, no one does it. Like, no one would want to do it. It's terrible. It would be a terrible, terrible experience, and it would make you die, maybe, or at least you would age really rapidly. So, there's that. What else, guys? Yeah, the holy wood. Ormus. I know that a lot of the same crazy ass people that think the elites chew adrenal glands, take Ormus. And no, I mean, also, I know that it's some form of gold. I can't remember the word off the top of my head. And I mean, I've taken it. I didn't really notice anything, but there's actually, I, I would, and here's why. Gold is highly conductive, and the brain, its mechanism of action basically is or what facilitates your brain activity is electricity, and so it stands to reason that having a bunch of highly conductive, gold in your blood would facilitate brain activity. In fact, a lot of people take Ormus before they have psychedelic experiences, and they say that it kind of facilitates it. Also, it seems to have some impact on depression, just taking even like colloidal gold. And also, everything is metaphor, and gold, physical gold, elemental gold, is sort of like the physical reflection and matter of consciousness. That's really why it's so valuable. That's why people pursue it. It's also a physical representation of pure light. And so I think if you're going to consume anything, really, gold in some form would be the thing to take. I mean, I don't have access to that kind of stuff here. We don't even have street addresses in Ecuador. I mean, it's kind of difficult to order stuff, I guess, is what I'm saying. Well, yeah, I mean, sure, but I still think that there's some relationship with all of that. And there have been tests, I think, that suggest that I mean, I'm not an expert on having gold in your brain, but I just remember reading something that, there was some evidence actually that cognitive processes and depression were both benefit from consuming different forms of gold. And I would think just logically that makes sense. But no, I don't know a ton about it. I know that a lot of people say that the Egyptian pharaohs and stuff would consume it, and that's where they got a lot of their mojo from, and that it heals all kinds of different stuff. And I don't know. Well, the gold crowns were, at least in part, a reference to the light of Keter. But then again, it probably depends on like who you're talking about, what kind of context. So, like, oh, you mean an all royalty? Like why that's a universal thing to put gold on your head. It's just the next best thing from putting gold in your head. Yeah, well, it's too bad I didn't bring the guitar down again. Anything else, guys? I'm out of ammunition. I thought of something else. We talked about the adrenochrome. Someone asking me what's up with the adrenochrome prison system. Oh yeah, Sumeria, dude. I'm glad you asked that. I was going to talk about that actually. It's really good that you asked that. Because this is interesting and it's really relevant for me. One of the big events in my life, I guess, was this I don't know what to call it, interaction with the Sioux Sundance chief and his associates that, their mission is to inform the white devils that there are star tribes here communicating with us telepathically. And so some years later, I had an ayahuasca experience where I was told by Pachamama first, I was given like a vision of this being that I used to always have visions of. And I never knew what it was. Like I would just be driving along and then I would see it in my mind's eye, and it was like this geisha, almost like demon geisha or something, with like big long ibex horns and like a purple and white face, and really beautiful and kind of cartoony. And I would always just think like, wow, that's really crazy, but what is that? And I also noticed that every time I would just randomly have this image in my mind, that it was totally identical, which was odd. I thought that my mind could just reconstruct every last detail exactly the same way every time, like every few years or whatever. But eventually, it stopped, and so I happened to drink ayahuasca this one night, and I was walking along, and there's the narrating female voice of Pachamama. I mean, the way I experience ayahuasca is usually that there's like a whole host of different beings or intelligences that I'll interact with at different times, or observe or whatever. But it's not this thing like where people talk about Pachamama as like the spirit of ayahuasca that you're communicating with. For me, it's always like she is like the MC or something, like the sort of the central, and sometimes she'll like even introduce the other DMT entities or whatever, like. So she says to me, "Remember this?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she said, "Would you like to know what it is?" I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Well, you know how physicists say that one object can be in two places, but it's not two objects, it's one object in two places." It's like, "Yes." And she said, "Okay, well, this is you, this other thing here with the horns and the..." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "You exist also on a gas giant near Sirius A and Sirius B that didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence of Sirius A and Sirius B. It remained a gas giant." And then I just started to remember, I guess, all this stuff. I was like, "Oh yeah, so we're not exactly physical. We're just kind of like almost like pure consciousness. It's like using this like chemical gaseous matter to sort of like materialize in a way, but material form's not really that relevant even, it's just like consciousness needs some kind of order bearing symmetry, or order bearing some kind of material, whether it's subatomic particles or chemical or gaseous, I guess, something to create the symmetry that gives rise to consciousness." And so she's like, "You transmit the secret teachings, the secret doctrine that, Blavatsky talked about to, people and minerals and all plants and all sorts of stuff." She's like, "I was really surprised to see you here, It's like, what the fuck, And so at the end of the night, they passed a stalking stick around the ayahuasca tent, and so I told everyone there what happened. And so, I know I've talked about this recently, but a few days afterwards, it occurred to me, 10 days afterwards, it occurred to me to check and to see if it was true that there was a third body that was a gas giant, to see if we know that or not. And so I Googled it, and I only was able to find one paper that had just been published like the day before, which means that this had just been asserted like after I was told. So it's not even like it was in the collective mind of humanity somewhere. No one on the planet knew this yet when I did. And so the paper said there's a gas giant between Sirius A and Sirius B that didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence of the, and I guess they've been noting a wobble on Sirius B for ever, and they didn't know what it was, and now they think it's this gas giant, and they specifically said that it didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence, which was exactly what this Pachamama told me. So then I'm thinking like, okay, so I'm also a gaseous alien somewhere, you know? And so that was also what, okay, so it gets a little bit weirder though. I was randomly looking somewhere else and I found the writings of one of the students of Blavatsky, Alice Bailey or Anne Bailey, I can't remember, brilliant woman. She wrote all these books that, she was a little bit less dark and cynical or whatever. The Blavatsky, I like that better. You know, it's not as fluffy or whatever, but much more light. Okay, so much more light and feminine. And so I just randomly, a few days after I found the astrophysics or whatever, the astronomical information about this gas giant, I found the writings of this Bailey woman saying that there are these beings on a planet near Sirius B that transmit this secret doctrine all over the planet, and I was like, what the or all over the universe. So that was fucking crazy, and I mean, her wording was identical to Pachamama's on this. So but then I thought, okay, so though this at least existed already in the minds of somebody somewhere at some point, because here it is in this old occult writings of this woman. But still, she didn't say anything about it being a gas giant, you know, because of the gravitational influence of the other two stars or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that specific shit wasn't there. But the stuff about these beings transmitting this type of knowledge to all the different, you know, even to minerals, it was all there. And she said that's why the blue star is in the Masonic lodges, because it's serious. And then today I was, you know, I've studied the Babylonians and Syria, ancient Syria, and all of this kind of stuff, and whichever ones you mentioned. And so today I was looking at the what do you call it, like the beliefs, I guess, of those people that you just mentioned. I can't remember the name for some reason. And they were mentioning that they knew about like the precession of the equinoxes, which isn't really that crazy. I mean, the Mayans knew about it too. It just kind of suggests the civilization might be way older than a lot of anthropologists think. But then they mentioned about how there was this extra planet, like they knew about all the planets in the solar system somehow. But then there was also Nibiru, which is where these beings transmitted the secret doctrine from, and I was like, what the hell, you know? I missed that, and it's totally consistent with this crazy transmission from the ayahuasca spirit, I guess, that I received. Pretty trippy. Another thing that is worthy of note, you guys, is that if you're watching online right now, you know, and I realize that, you know, technology is getting better and better, and I guess people could fake things, and maybe I'm just not hip. But there sure is an awful lot of really convincing looking UFO video all of a sudden. And I don't know if that's because there is an increase in activity, or if it's because our phones have higher definition and people have better cameras, or what is going on. But that's another thing that I think is worthy of our attention, to be aware that something's up. Something's up. All right, anything else, dudes, peoples? Illuminati, all the UFO vids recently released are bunk. I mean, I don't know why you would say that. It sounds like regurgitated opinion to me, honestly. That like someone is saying that and you've decided to agree with them. I would say that unless you've actually like been on the ships or something, you can't really say that. I mean, and I know, that I've heard things. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I mean, there might also be a bunch of bunk ones, but I don't think they're all bunk. I mean, maybe you're talking about a specific batch of them or something. Oh man, that is so trippy because I was actually going to do a book list live stream next and talk about that. Partly because I, I feel like there are some people that are just totally badass that are being forgotten by the psychedelic culture, and it's totally lame. One of those people is Robert Anton Wilson. And my favorite is the Illuminatus Trilogy. The Illuminatus Trilogy is the most incredible book ever written. If you know about James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, that is. We'll talk about that in a second because it's difficult to even speak about it. Um, it's not even written in the normal sense of the word. So the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson is, at least in part, written at random. It was written and then cut up into pieces, and they took LSD and put it in a hat, and then took pieces out and taped them together, or something, patched them together. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And so it's very difficult to get through the first 100 pages or so because you are shifting from time and place. From you might be in a character's head at 1 second, and then you're somewhere else, and it's a narrator, and then it's some random other person's head, and it's just bouncing around, and you don't even know what the fuck is going on. So you just have to kind of bear with it, and then you'll understand what's happening later. And then once you get past the first 100 pages, it's oh man, I gotta get when I go to Tenna, I gotta get a new one of these things because it doesn't like the new iPhone. It's too wide or something. Okay, so Illuminatus trilogy, and then Prometheus Rising is another one that he wrote that is really good, and then there's Cosmic Trigger, which he said that it's Cosmic Trigger, Final Secret of the Illuminati, and I think it actually is the final secret of the Illuminati, and that's why they beat his daughter to death. Um, and so this whole thing with aliens transmitting information from Sirius is a pretty common theme with all of these kind of people somehow. And so, and so he said that in 1974 he started to receive transmissions from telepathically from an alien, an alien from Sirius, and and later he said that he just thought that he went insane and that, it wasn't real and all of this stuff. But I don't actually believe him because the book does not strike one as the product of a disordered mind at all, for one thing. And I'm pretty sure everything in there is legitimate. So I think what actually happened is that right after he published that book, his daughter was walking home in LA and she was beaten to death. And I think he still had another daughter. And just in case, I don't think he made up his mind really ever, if that's why it happened. But just in case, in the interest of protecting himself and his family, I think he just decided to say that he had gone insane and that everyone should ignore Cosmic Trigger, Final Secret of the Illuminati. Not so sure about that. So from Robert Anton Wilson, and then of course Neuropolitique and High Priest by Timothy Leary, and there's a bunch of other random Leary stuff. Sure, yeah, a lot of them are, but I mean I've seen some pretty convincing weird stuff too, and I mean I've seen it with my own eyes, not necessarily recently, but. Um, I mean, some of these things, actually, a friend of mine got some video from up on a mountain the other day that I mean, she couldn't fake shit with her camera, man, and it's crazy, and it's what I would expect from alien technology because it looks like it's based on light more than, you know, a hunk of metal floating around in the atmosphere. Uh, so so the Book of Lies by Aleister Crowley, the Book of Lies so falsely called, would definitely also be on that list for sure. Uh, but it's important that you actually take the time. If you don't know what Nechema is and what the Ruach is and what Keter is and you know all of your terms from the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism or anything else in there that you don't recognize, you have to take the time to look it up. It's worth it. The book is so profound, and this is something that I think that I have observed with anything that comes from that place of great depth, that it's always multi-layered. It's interdimensional, and therefore it manifests as interdimensional. In when it's just a book, you know what I mean? And so when you read the Book of Lies the first time, you will get stuff from it, but then you'll put it down, and it's short, and every page is just a little bit of like poetry almost, and then you pick it up again, and you realize that you didn't come close to comprehending the book at all, and then you could do that 6 months again later, and it just never stops. It seems like as you evolve and you read this book continuously, it just takes on greater and greater depth. And so that's another one. Terence Mckenna. But honestly, like most of his best stuff, I think, is in his talks. When I think about his books, I don't really. I mean, it's important to know the stuff in Food of the Gods in a historical context, but it's not really that interesting to me anymore. And I think a lot of the stuff in like Invisible Landscape, they kind of decided they didn't really think that stuff anymore themselves. So I don't know that we should like bother to read it. So I don't know. But on a totally different level that has nothing to do with psychedelic culture, Graham Hancock is fine, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I've never really been never really been that interested in him. Mostly because I feel like what he does is a lot of historical conjecture. He looks at circumstances and he draws conclusions from them. And I don't really see that those conclusions are quite as like concrete as he does. I mean, it's like a whole lot of just reading between the lines and filling in like whatever. And I'm just not so sure about a lot of it. But I do appreciate some of the work that he's done with, like from the Amazon, for example. I mean, he's really brought attention to the fact that, we're destroying it before we even know what's there. I mean, I was not aware until I heard Hancock say it, that the unexplored area of the Amazon rainforest is the size of the entire continent of India. That is fucking bonkers, man. That is just absolutely insane that there's that much jungle that we have no clue what is in there. And we're actually able to find out now without disrupting it in large part because of satellites or some kind of like imaging technology that they can kind of look under the jungle and see what's down there in terms of buried structure and all that stuff. And then also interesting, he has presented this. I mean, I don't think it's his idea, but I heard him talking to Rogan about this. The Amazon rainforest is actually more like a garden than a forest, and there's this black soil because things actually don't grow very well here. I've seen people, especially in the Andes Mountains, man, you can't fucking grow anything. It's not like you would think that you'd go down to the jungle, like the sun is super intense because we're at the equator and there's constantly stuff dying and rotting, so it should be like super nutrient dense and but it's just not like that. It's actually pretty difficult to grow just about anything here, unless it's something that grows in the jungle. Uh, I will tell you though that like cacao and things that are endogenous here definitely grow very, very well, but farming is very difficult. And so they actually created some kind of biochar based, also, what is it called when you have all the little bugs in the mycorrhiza, I guess, um, and so there's this black soil that's super, super old, but I guess there's a lot of it. And because there used to be like some incredible number of people here in all these massive cities that we didn't know about until, yeah, living soil. Well, that's a different. Well, I don't know what you mean by that. There's different things that are called living soil. There's soil that actually like builds itself up into structures because there are microbes growing in it, and it takes like 100,000 years or something, or 10,000 years, some crazy length. Maybe it's just 1,000 years. I don't know, but whatever. They build these little, almost like sandcastle looking things, and it's just these like microscopic organisms that are doing it. And I just saw some of that in the jungle. I was kind of surprised to see it. Man, it is really like there's like fast, loud bass out there and stuff. It doesn't really happen out here that much. Yeah, giant cities in the Amazon, unexplored parts the size of fucking India. Okay, so the last thing that we'll talk about is Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, because this is quite likely the most mind-blowing thing that mankind has ever created outside of maybe the Grateful Dead and LSD. But Finnegan's Wake is a book written by James Joyce, who spoke like 62 languages fluently somehow. And he was super drunk, I guess. It took him 18 years to construct this book. And it's written in portmanteau and polyglot syllables. So you might have a word that has 3 syllables, and the first syllable means something in French, something in Japanese, and something in something else. And then the middle syllable means different stuff in all these different languages. And then so you can draw a line between all the different languages and all the different syllables, and then you can extract all that shit and create paragraphs from single sentences. And because all the ways that they can interrelate, because they're actually like multi-layered with meaning because of the different languages that are, it's just insane. And on top of that, in the references that are being made to historical things and occult references from Freemasonry, and I mean, you have to be a serious fucking intellectual, but also like a high-ranking Freemason or an adept of the mystery schools to read this fucking book. And also like a linguistic anthropologist or something. I mean, and so, there are people that are like, Finnegan's Wake scholars, and you can't really do it. You can't just like read this book. You have to have like the Skeleton's Key that was written by Joseph Campbell. That's really helpful for decoding it. Even the title Finnegan is a reference to the main character, who is a drunk guy from an Irish tale who falls off a ladder, and then everyone's at his wake, but then someone spills whiskey on him and he gets up out of the casket. So you don't know if he was just sleeping or if he was dead. So that's the song, but so the character in the story is also doing that. You can't tell if he's being reincarnated or if he's a god becoming a new aeon and the old god is dying and resurrecting, or if it's an individual. So it's because it's a really obtuse story that is, it's just fucking nuts. And so there's all these occult things too, sort of intertwined into it. Like the first sentence of the book begins in the middle of the last sentence. So the book makes a full circle that just goes around and around and around. And yeah, that motherfucking thing is just completely insane. And you know, to put it in perspective, when Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter, who ultimately was be his lyricist, were like 15 years old, they used to sit around and just like read that book together. And that just kind of puts in perspective what kind of minds were behind that band, that these guys were doing that at 15 years old, because it's too much for most Ivy League scholars, you know. And that was before they ever even did acid. So it's absolutely mind-boggling. So yeah, for sure, James Joyce, man, and Finnegan's Wake, but it's a lifelong project. It's not like, oh, I'm just gonna read this book. No, you're gonna read like 4 sentences of it, and then you're gonna have like 6 other books and 2 laptops sitting there to help you figure out what the fuck it's saying before you can move on. And then you're gonna have to go back to the beginning of the book probably and start over and decode everything like 7 or 8 times every time you get to the end of another chapter or whatever. I mean, it's worth it, because I think what James Joyce demonstrated with that is that there are artifacts of art that have been created by humans that could not possibly have been conscious creations of humans. There's no way that James Joyce could have conceived of writing a book where every syllable means different things in different languages, and so you can take every syllable as part of a different language and then phonetically say the word and it's an English word. It might not be spelled correctly, but when you read it, like, you know, phonetically, like you say it, it comes out sounding like something you recognize as English. And somehow all of this gobbledygook tells a semi-coherent story with like 8 layers of possible interpretation. You can't do that. Like, you know, no human being could do that. And he did it all drunk. So it just doesn't make any sense, you know. It's like not possible that Finnegan's Wake exists, but it does anyways. It literally can't be there, but it is anyways. That's kind of how I feel about the best Grateful Dead concerts, you know. There stuff happens in the music that couldn't happen. It just can't happen. It just did anyways. You have to really be paying attention, though, or you're just going to miss it, because these are fleeting moments. These transcendental moments are fleeting. Crazy how all over the place this fucking live stream went. We went from prison stories with Elvis's bass player and shit to aliens and Finnegan's Wake, like uber intellectual. This has been a ridiculous one, man, and it's just absurd that anyone would even, you know, that there's an audience for something that's crazy. All right, guys, it's getting late. I'm starving. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon if you can. You can send one-time support to the PayPal addresses or Zelle, the email, the cryptocurrency address. I'm trying to raise money this week. Like, seriously, we really need money right now, because I have to hire a canoe if we're going to go see if we can buy this big piece of land, and we can't do all this stuff out of pocket. So if you guys want to see these videos of us going into the jungle and meeting with, you know, all these crazy people and trying to save the forest from the Chinese miners, if I'm going to do anything other than sit around, I need your help to do it, basically. Long story short and blunt, that's where we're at. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Okay, what is expected in the afterlife? I will answer that now then, because I said I would. I mean, I don't really have anything to do. Just thinking I should probably eat. What is expected for us in the afterlife is that we just don't know what is expected for us in the afterlife, and no one that ever tells you what to expect in the afterlife knows what the fuck they're talking about. Unless they are saying maybe. Those people you can trust. But the ones that say, oh, I know this, you know, you don't know anything. Nobody knows anything. Get over it. It's fine. It's okay. Be in the mystery. That is the secret to life. To be in wonderment, to be amazed, to be open, but it is just as extraordinary to be skeptical, you know, and to use your faculties to discern, you know. And the reality is that even though, for example, I remember things from another person's life People have recognized me as this individual on the street during plant medicine ceremonies. A shaman did it the first time I drank San Pedro. I mean, most people would be totally convinced that they know that they're the reincarnation of this person that I have been identified as by strangers a dozen times. You know what I mean? Like, that would be good enough for most people. It's not good enough for me. It could be any number of things that could have caused that, including just really, 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 really improbable coincidence. I mean, like, you just don't know. And so you can come up with likelihoods that are informed by your experience and by your perception and by, knowledge. For example, energy cannot be destroyed, it can only transform. So that tells us that because our being is constituted of energy and our consciousness is constituted of energy, that energy will persist in some form or another. But when people tell you that that's proof that we are eternal consciousness, they're full of shit. Because just because the energy is going to be there doesn't mean that consciousness is going to be sustained and that there's going to be continuity of consciousness or existence. So we don't know. And sometimes I think that what DMT actually does is like totally turns off the reducing valve in the consciousness so that we're totally on the spirit plane. Like, that's what that is. When people talk about breakthroughs, that's the ultimate reality. And I think there are different layers of it. There seem to be three, not just to me. I mean, this is a pretty common perception that there are three levels to the DMT realms. The first one is the waiting room. The next one is like, I don't know what to call it, like an intermediary stage where there's more color, it's not as uncomfortable, the jesters aren't, there's different beings, right? The jesters that are always giving people the finger and they're kind of like almost evil looking and kind of just not nice. They're always in the waiting room area where things are still just orange, and then you go beyond that and there's more color and there's more geometry and it's got more depth and it's a little bit more comfortable. And then beyond that, there is a realm where human emotion doesn't even make any sense. It's got no relevance to anything. Things are happening in 22 dimensions, and we have no language for these things that we're observing. I think the brain is even forced to the brain may even be forced to or consciousness to expand because it's confronted with things that it has to expand in order to even process what it's trying to perceive. So like, if there's something happening in 11 dimensions and we normally only are processing 4 or whatever, then the brain, the consciousness has to expand to even perceive the thing it's confronted with, and that's where we get our that's part of why we get consciousness expansion from DMT experiences. So, and then, there's that, well, we talked about the 3 stages of it. So sometimes I think that's where we go. And honestly, I kind of hope not, because it's just too weird and actually, a lot of people intuitively have that reaction. I gave DMT to a Colombian woman one time that, when she came back, she's like, oh my God, I just don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And I was like, why? And she's like, because I don't want to be there forever. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe we just go there. I mean, it's really beautiful. And, I'm sure most of you guys have smoked DMT and have been there, but there's something disconcerting about it. There's something deeply uncomfortable about it. And I certainly wouldn't want to, I don't know that I would want to spend all of eternity there. Things don't make any goddamn sense either. It's just really, really, really weird. So I think that's really the only answer you're ever going to get, is that I've had really convincing experiences that suggest that I know who I was in 8 past lives or something. Yeah. What's interesting about that, the cat thing with DMT, there were experiments done by a Dr. Masters in Houston in the early 60s. The book was called The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience, which was a play on William James' variety of religious experience. and they at one point injected 1,000 people with high doses of DMT, and of the people that said that they saw God, 99% of them said that God is a jeweled cat. This is with no contact with each other. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, why would? And it's not. And make sure you're hearing me, like, you know, clearly, that it's not that 99% of the people that were injected with DMT saw God at all. It's that 99% of those that did see God when injected with DMT said that it was a jeweled cat. It was like 9 out of 10, I guess. You know, you don't really hear that from people that have smoked it, so I don't know if there's some kind of weird difference there either, but that's what they said in the book. You live with over 50 cats? You know what will happen if you take mushrooms in a room full of 50 cats? Every single one of those motherfuckers will lose their minds, and they will run around at lightning speed with their claws out, like cycloning. I made that mistake once when we had 22 cats. Oh, well, you don't mean in your house, but yeah, we had 22 cats actually in our house, and we took mushrooms, and as soon as the second the mushrooms got strong, the cats, every single one of them just went ballistic, running around in circles, like right across our heads, across our faces, with their claws out, until we could get rid of them. Yeah, well, maybe your cats are different, but these cats were terrors to trip with. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Animals react to like the change in the energy. And in my experience, when you have a shit ton of cats around, it's... So did we deal with the afterlife thing enough? I mean, there's just no answering this stuff, you know. But there's some pretty compelling shit. Like there's a woman that was dead for like, she doesn't even have brain damage or anything, but she was brain dead, like totally dead, for I think an hour and a half somehow, and she's fine now. She fell off a cliff, and she had total recollection of everything that was said, and oftentimes people have the ability to recall things that were discussed from great distances away while they're dead, and so they can go into other rooms, and they have this sort of it's sort of like when a magician formulates the body of light and travels on the astral plane, which I think a lot of people well, yeah, I think that things are all living symbols. Well, you're saying that cats are so much more than cats, basically, and of course they are. Things are manifestations of their archetype in consciousness. I think it's really what things are. And so there is an infinite spectrum of possibilities and potentialities to be fulfilled along that spectrum of consciousness, and that's so where we get all of the variation. But there's also like bandwidths, like subsegments. So you have a person like me who you could say is mercurial, and then there are archetypes that are very similar to me, and everyone has that. But then, you know, the people that fall into that category of that archetype are still different, fundamentally. And so, you know, I think that the cats are... I mean, I guess that's what you mean. I don't know. It's also interesting that the idea that, you know, I mean, the way that Kabbalion puts it is that gender isn't everything, and it's interesting that it doesn't really matter whether a cat is male or female. They have characteristics that we associate with being feminine qualities, and dogs are boys. You know, dogs are boys, cats are girls. And weirdly, And I don't know if this has something to do with the consciousness and training with that of humans from exposure or something. But dogs chase cats. And you know what I mean? Like there's these weird fucking parallels that I think are expressions of that consciousness because fundamentally, even though it has sort of exploded so that it can be compartmentalized in all of its variation or expressed in all of its variation, it's still fundamentally just one consciousness. So feminine energy always does what feminine energy does, and when it manifests in a system, it gives it characteristics. But it's still, at the end of the day, just one of these two fundamental expressions of consciousness that are the antonymical opposites that are interacting to facilitate all of creation or to sustain it or to create it together. And it seems like the closer you get to, or the higher up you go in the consciousness hierarchy, the more the systems clearly express the characteristics of that consciousness of which they are an expression. So, for example, with human interaction and the way that the masculine and the feminine interact, it's very obvious what they are. Like a human woman is able to express that feminine consciousness much more clearly than a human or than a female monkey. You know what I mean? Or a very feminine rock or whatever. You know what I mean? Like. Plants even do it too, man. And this is a crazy one. Mandrake, Mandrake root. There are male and female mandrake plants, and the male mandrake, when you pull it out of the ground, it looks like a human male, and the female mandrake looks like a human female, like a little doll. And the female mandrake is like curvy and the male root is very blocky. And so, the evidence that this kind of, like, I guess, hermetic perception of how the universe works and the underlying consciousness, there's tremendous amount of, well, it's like once you know how to look, you can see it all very easily. It's very thinly veiled. That's why I'm always saying that, this idea that I have and that people like me have always had, I think that we can just push people just a little bit, and that a more illuminated society would actually be plausible. A lot of people consider that too utopian, but I think it's actually very, very thinly veiled, and it's really not that difficult. Also, once the capacity to process the information according to this protocol that yields this knowledge, once you learn to do it with one system, you will find yourself instinctively doing it with all the other systems. And so, like the Kabbalion says that the ears of wisdom or the lips of wisdom are closed, but to the ears of understanding. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm always saying that too. That it's, if it wasn't for the intentional suppression of the evolution and expression of consciousness in our culture at large, illumination would not be like this like crazy rare thing, and people would not be lost and suffering from this tremendous crisis of purpose that is the norm. These are all manufactured circumstances, and I think in our natural state, whenever sometimes people will get, you know, those kind of impressed by like my perspective on this stuff, and I always kind of just feel like it shouldn't be unusual for people to be able to perceive the living universe, the conscious universe, and I don't think that it's really anything exceptional. It's just that I was not part of the society to an extent that facilitated that level of indoctrination, and my perception wasn't constrained, and so I'm just sort of in that way normal relative to relative to the fucking Mad Hatter's Tea Party that I think the rest of the ironically normal culture, you know. Yeah. All right, 120 minutes we are at, you guys. I'm gonna say it one more time because we're doing good work down here and we need your support, especially this week, like before the first, because I gotta rent a canoe and pay a guide. So if you can contribute something, if you like this content, you wanna keep it going, we are demonetized. So hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon for premium content. You can send one-time contribution to the email address via Zelle or PayPal. There's a Cash App and a wallet address. So if you're feeling so inclined and you want to help us with our conservation efforts. Also, I want to mention, since there's 10 of you guys, I don't know if some of you might not have heard this yet, we're trying to find partners and investors to buy a piece of rainforest that is 1,500 hectares with a gold-bearing river and corn already planted. And so the gist of it is that it is a conservation effort, but it could also be a profitable property, so a self-sustaining situation. There's buildings on the property already. It's only accessible by rivers, but from 3 rivers, and there are already like indigenous workshops kind of happening there. So there's just a tremendous amount of potential, but I very rapidly would have to find investors and collaborators in order to do anything about it, and I have to rent a canoe and go to the property and make video for some potential investors. Yeah, 15 people with 50 grand each could make it happen really easily. The Zelle link is in the description. There is a email, and it's also at the top of the chat. But if you look in the email from this blookers@gmail.com. So thank you so much, you guys. I've been talking pretty much a nonstop stream, just like every other night this week, which, you know, I've been doing this to try to raise money every day. I don't normally live stream every single day, but I've been doing it every single day because I need to go see a healer and get healed, and the taxi is expensive every time, and she is expensive every time. And then we're trying to get this property together, and I'm just trying to do everything I can to have some positive impact. And also, you know, check out Safe DMT if you're into cryptocurrency. Those guys are collaborating with me, possibly to try to do something about this property. They're funding psychedelic research, and so it is a way for you to make a profit while having an impact. And I think that's that's like the best part of cryptocurrency, that if you find the right projects and align yourself with the right projects, you can turn conservation into a profitable endeavor instead of just a charitable one that meant save you some tax money. So there's a lot of people out there giving people the power right now, and we all need to get out there and get involved, because if we don't put the brakes on this locomotive, it's about to just roll right off a cliff. You know, I mean, we have to take the reins, and the only way for us to do that is to consolidate power, and unfortunately, I mean, it's not unfortunate, it's just difficult that we the circumstances dictate that money is what is going to give us that power. So we really need to try to empower ourselves by every means necessary and empower the people that are out there doing good work. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.